I'm so glad you're joining me today. We're going to be talking about why the public struggles to believe that victims are being abused. Why do we end up alone in these circumstances? How come the people who promise to be our social support system end up not showing up? Or when they do try to show up, they don't show up in the right way. So today we're going to talk about the isolation so many of us feel when we wake up to the reality that we're in a narcissistically abusive situation. I want to talk about it from a couple different angles today. I want to talk about it why the public struggles to understand abuse, why it's so likely to reject your possible story, but I also want to talk about what to do if you find yourself in this position, because I know so many of us do. And the best predictor of recovery is a strong social support system. So here you are in your situation looking for support, and you end up not getting the very support that you need. So I want to be able to talk about how do we then handle that? The fact that we're in this situation that seemingly nobody really gets. Maybe you're feeling invalidated, minimized, maybe dismissed, or even gaslighted by your community. So what do we do when we're in these positions and we're feeling so incredibly alone and so incredibly isolated? So I'm so glad you're here today. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed mental health clinician with over 20 years of counseling experience. And these days, I primarily provide education on narcissistic abuse. And we talk about these relationships with narcissists and other toxic people from all sorts of angles. Some weeks we'll talk about gaslighting. Other weeks we may talk about how to argue or not argue, or what the gray rock technique is. But today we're going to be talking about the social isolation so many of us experience in these relationships, why that happens, and what to do about it when it does happen to you. So let's first launch in, and I'd be happy to take your questions at the end of this today. I'll let you know when I'm kind of done talking, but then we'll flip it, and I will take your questions at the end of this, and we'll whatever you're struggling with. And I know some of you have requested to join this live. I don't accept requests unless you plan ahead. You have to contact me by DMing me privately to request to be on a live, and then I'll consider it, making sure that it fits the topic, because each week I have a specific topic. So I appreciate that so much. But so why do people not believe us when we tell them that we're being abused? Let's start there, because I was shocked. I'd been a counselor most of my life. I mean, I got out of high school, went right to college for psychology. And then I went I spent 3 years in mental health field, but then I went right into grad school. So I spent majority of my life in the first part of my adult life training, and it was very important to me to know how to show up to people, because I view that as critical. I know for me, the times I have been isolated, it has nearly been unbearable. So I certainly didn't want to be a part of that. But when I got into that narcissistic abuse, yes, JS 101, I am absolutely going to yap, because you're here for a little bit of a lecture. So if you want to stick around to the back half, I'd happy to take your questions. But in this first half, I'm going to yap. So I was really shocked to find out that people weren't supportive, that they were pretty rude, actually. That's how I experienced it. I experienced people just not only disbelieving me, but really wanting to believe that the abuse couldn't be that bad. And I bet you've experienced the same thing. I bet you've had people tell you that your partner is a good person, that they seem so nice and they do such good things for the community. Maybe they've shown up and they volunteer. Maybe they're the most active person in your neighborhood association, or the most active person at school. So when you start to say something about what's happening behind closed doors, you're probably met with skepticism or cynicism. Maybe you even have gotten invalidated, like you must have misunderstood. Even though here you're the one living with the person day in and day out, you have other people telling you that they know this person better than you. It's so ironic how that happens like that. But you may also, this is what I experienced too. I experienced that people were uncomfortable, like to the point that made me feel awkward. That I would start to bring up a topic and I could just see their eyes get this funny look, and I almost felt like they thought I was making up, like I was lying. That somehow they thought this was from a movie script and I couldn't really be telling the truth. And I remember just wishing that the ground would open up and swallow me. I felt so humiliated by that experience. And this is the other thing I also experienced. I experienced some people would listen to me and then begin to critique me about why I was doing what I was doing and why didn't I do more and shouldn't I be having healthier boundaries or what was going wrong with me. And I know a lot of us experience that also in when we step into counseling. Some therapists don't understand about betrayal trauma, and as a result they end up then they look at you and they want to know what you're doing to participate in this or contribute to this. And so there were times, I remember one friend of mine who said, well, you seem really angry. Maybe you need to be working on your anger from a spiritual angle. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm angry. He's seeing other women and he's serial cheating. And I've just found out some devastating information and I'm blown away. I feel like gutted. I feel, yeah, I'm very angry. I just looked at this person and thought, if I'd been sitting in this anger for months, maybe that would be a helpful thing to say to me. If I was like year after year angry, but to someone who's just processing this devastating information, who feels betrayed and grieved and frightened, yeah, I'm angry. I'm really angry. So you may have experienced that too, where people, they end up judging your emotional reaction, maybe thinking you're a little too intense, maybe it can't really be that bad, or maybe you need to work on yourself and things will get better. In other words, maybe you're the problem. There is this belief that we have in the public sphere. And it was interesting because I actually saw it from a professional. I was reading a book and this professional said the same thing in the book, that there's this belief that we have, it's very pervasive, that relationship problems are always a result of both partners. And I'll tell you, if you met me back in the day, back when I was counseling, back before I'd been narcissistically abused, I believed the same thing. I would have told you, yeah, it takes two to tango. I would have said something like that. That's a very common philosophy. So when we bring up the abuse, people then often want to know what has been our contribution to the situation. They assume that somehow we set this person off, or we're not showing up in a way that makes them want to be a good partner to us. Or maybe we're not really maybe we're nagging too much, we're complaining too much. So as a result, people end up looking at our behavior and thinking, well, you must have somehow made some of this happen. You have to take some responsibility for this. And I'll tell you, I don't know about your situation, but I married into this. I married a person who had been married before and already failed several times. In fact, when I interviewed for the book Love You More, I wrote about this in the book Love You More. I actually went back and interviewed his past wives. He'd been married more than once. And would you believe that I found the wives told the exact same story? And it was more than one wife. They exactly said the same story. So what I happened to me wasn't unique to me. This is the person's, almost like their script. In fact, it almost felt like, I bet you I could have timelined his behavior. Yeah, he love bombed. This is how fast he got engaged. This is how fast they married. This was the first time they found out that he was cheating. And I bet you I could track on a timeline the way he moved through relationships, because it was that predictable. So for people to look at me and say, well, it must be you. You must have done something, like, no, listen, this guy has done this to other people in the exact same way. It didn't take anything from me. This was a script this person was following. So it can feel very discombobulating. So I'm going to take a break again, introduce myself. Also, be sure to like this. Right now, my likes across all these platforms are real low. So if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, or for TikTok, tapping the screen and liking it. For Instagram, just liking there's a little like button. I really, really appreciate it. It helps just to promote this so we get better traction on all these platforms. Thank you so much. You guys are doing great. I appreciate that. So I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. And like I said, every week we come on here live at 4 p.m. and we talk about narcissistic abuse from a different angle. And if you're ever wanting to know what the topic is going to be, check out my YouTube page, because I announce it on Monday there. So that way you can kind of come into these lives knowing what I'm going to be talking about. Not that you have to use that platform to watch me, but that's one way if you want to know what the topic is, because I do plan these out ahead. So yeah, I see I see that a lot of you guys are saying, yes, this is exactly what I've been experiencing. I've had people disbelieve me or not show up. And then some of you have mentioned this, and this is the other thing. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Tabitha. Thank you for popping in and being new. Some of you have already mentioned the smear campaign. That's the other thing that happens on the back end. Part of what's happening during the relationship is the narcissist is setting themselves up into a position that when the relationship goes wrong or goes bad, that they look like the good guy or the wonderful woman. Some of this is image management, reputation management in preparation because they know they go through these relationships a lot. In fact, I've been reading, and I need to buy a hard copy or at least a paperback copy so I can show it to you. But I've been reading a book called Gaslighting by Dr. Sarkis, Sarkis, Dr. Sarkis, Gaslighting. It's the name of the book. It's yellow. So if you go to Amazon and look for it, look for a yellow book called Gaslighting by Dr. Sarkis. She said, and I thought this is fascinating. She said that toxic people who are she's actually talking about gaslighters. She doesn't name them as narcissists or toxic people, but that's who she's talking about. She said chronic gaslighters actually usually live in large cities because it's easier to hide their bad behavior in the anonymity. I can't ever say that word. In the largeness in the population, they're able to hide bad behavior. They're able to stay anonymous so that we don't bump into their past exes, whoever they are, or ex-wives or ex-partners or ex-husbands. So that way you don't bump into them. And the other thing they do, and watch for this as well, you'll notice that they're not on social media a lot. They may, in an anonymous way, like to the degree they can avoid having an account or anonymous account, but they tend not to have an account that's tied to themselves. Again, that's so that you don't have past partners finding them and then tracking them down and contacting them. It's part of this way for them to control who has access to them and control the access and the view you see of them. They don't want you bumping into these other people because then they don't want you to know this history. And that's why when I contacted his past wives, I thought it was fascinating. And in fact, I had the urge when we were dating that I should contact them, but I thought that's just too creepy. As a girlfriend, I shouldn't be doing that. And if I'm wanting to do that, what does that mean? But I did do it afterwards, partly just as research for the book, for Love You More. And it was fascinating. Hearing this and it was very, very much affirmed that it really wasn't it takes two to tango problem. It was, this is what this person does. This is their MO. This is how they approach relationships. So it's really good for us to know that. So when the public who doesn't know that says that to us, we don't own it. It's not actually criticism of you. It actually indicates ignorance on the part of the speaker. Though they may be very well-meaning and trying to love you and support you, it indicates how little they understand this dynamic that they can't show up and help you better around these issues. So why does the public not believe us? Here's some guesses. I haven't done a lot of research into this, but off the top of my head, here's what I've noticed. I think for the majority of the world, we don't like to think bad people exist because it makes us uncomfortable, makes us feel scared. We don't really want to believe that there are monsters in our midst. So we would prefer to pathologize, to blame the victim, than to say that the victim's right, that there are monstrous people and that maybe the person we know this person's in a relationship with is one of them. We just find that super uncomfortable. So I think that's one reason why we don't do it. I also think that we really like to believe the world is safe, that maybe we know when we turn on the news that bad stuff is happening around the world right now, and that makes us feel really uncomfortable. But we like to imagine our corner of the world isn't like the larger world, that isn't that dangerous a space. So we really discount danger in general because it's uncomfortable to think that we can have bad people in our midst who are doing things that are harmful. So that's another reason I think that we tend to discount it, because we just don't know how to adjust our mental view that bad things happen right in our own neighborhood, right in our back door, if we're not aware of it. I think another reason why public struggles with it is because the mask that narcissists and psychopaths and sociopaths wear, which is called the mask of sanity, There's a Dr. Cleckley, I believe is his name, wrote about it in the 1950s, I believe, roughly around then. It's called A Mask of Sanity. They're so good at putting on a show and appearing normal in the public that the public then believes that that is the real person. And hey, we did too. When we met them and they were love bombing us, we really thought that the Dr. Jekyll persona was the actual real person. We didn't know that the Mr. Hyde we hadn't met yet was really who this person was. And that when we met them, then we're going to meet this whole kind of other person that's going to be very, very different. And it happens to the public. I think the public really struggles because they see this good mask. They think this must be a good person. They don't like the idea that there is this duality as well. In a way, they're experiencing cognitive dissonance, but they just don't realize it. So when you tell them, hey, this person says, it calls me names and they're cheating or they're lying or they're betraying me or they're controlling money, they just end up, they don't kind of see it the same way. So that makes it super hard. Yeah, I see the question about narcissistic parents. I don't cover that topic super a lot. I cover it from the standpoint of raising kids. How do you raise kids at different ages and how to help them? But as far as like how to cope with toxic parents directly on, it's something I don't kind of make my main content because it's for lots of complicated reasons. So, but I do kind of brush up against it. But I agree, the names that Kate's giving you are very, very good names, and I would definitely just check those content creators out. So, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there was a question that came in on TikTok about how do you handle a narcissistic parent. There's a couple accounts that are really great if you're on Instagram or on TikTok, and one is Discovering Me with Bree. And the other one is Dream Girl 7. So those are some accounts that you can follow if you're looking for more of that specific content. So that's another reason why people don't believe it, is because narcissists and other toxic people are so good at faking. In fact, did you know that Ted Bundy actually was married? Yeah, Ted Bundy had a wife. There's a movie that they made about it. And I also, if you may have read The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule, and Ted Bundy, by the way, was a suicide hotline. And he took hotline calls. So when people were in desperation and in a crisis, he was one of the hotline. I don't know if it was a volunteer or not, but he worked on a hotline. So here you've got this guy who looks like a stand-up college grad who's, pulling it off, like really amazing person. And he's a serial killer. I mean, he's just out like deadly person. And Anne Rule knew him. She'd worked alongside of him and had no idea that this person was harmful like that. Oh, Tabitha, if you look at the person above you, Kate just posted those accounts just again for you. Yeah. So yeah, she's posting them again. Those are other accounts, Tabitha, to follow if you're looking for narcissistic abuse content. Those are fabulous accounts. Make sure you add Stronger Than, yeah, you did. Stronger Than Before is another really great one. Stronger Than Before has a so that's Lisa Sunny. For those of you who don't know her, you know her by her name. Stronger Than Before, Lisa Sunny is having a workshop the end of this month on how to beat your ex in court. It's going to be all about how to handle the legal aspect of what happens to so many of us when we're divorcing and we've got kids, and then we just have this horrible legal battle and we don't really know what to do. So if you are looking for support, there's actually going to be a seminar that Lisa is holding near the end of October. And I don't get any kickback for that. She's a good friend of mine and I happen to know about it. And I know she does great stuff. All her stuff is great stuff. So I would definitely check all that out. So yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff I don't see, Dream Girl, that passes really fast that I don't see all of it. So back to the topic of being alone in the narcissistic abuse community. I mean, we're not alone because we have this community. You're here hanging out with me. We got a community right here. But being alone in the public, yeah, they set themselves up with a good reputation, partly because they're also setting up the story to explain why you left. So let's back up. Narcissists and toxic people who've been around the block a few times know relationships are not going to last. They know that this is going to end up blowing up because all relationships blow up. And they're very much about managing their image because it's actually one of the only things that they've got. So when you're in that relationship, they're already prepping for the discard, believe it or not. So part of what you're seeing is you're seeing brand management. If you think of it like a social media account, they're like a brand account manager who's trying to make sure that the PR is good. So they're working the angle to get ready for when the discard. So they come out on the right end and they look like they're fantastic. And they're going to take your qualities, some of the ways in which you sort of handle stress and anxiety. They're going to take that and they're going to blow it up in a way that makes you look bad. They're going to even predict. See, they're super, super good. See, if you're predatory, let me back up even further. If you're predatory, let's imagine for a moment that you're in the animal kingdom and your life depends on your hunting skills. All right. That's the only way you're going to survive is you're going to have to be a really, really good hunter. Well, those that you hunt, you're going to get super good at understanding their habits. You're going to know when they're out. You're going to know where they eat and find water. You're going to know where they sleep. You're going to know when they're active and when they're not. You're going to know when they're vigilant and when they're not. You're going to know their hot buttons. You're going to know everything that it takes in order for you to get them because your life depends on your ability to do that. Well, unfortunately, for lots of complicated reasons, narcissists and other toxic people view the world in a similar way. They're hunters. They're predators. So, and they don't see anybody as on their side. Now, it may look like they have sidekicks. I often think, for example, if Batman was a narcissist, and I'm not saying Batman was, but if Batman was a narcissist, Robin was not his equal. Robin was just an extension of himself. So narcissists don't see anybody as having their back or as somebody that they can trust. Everybody is somebody that they're using as either extension of themselves or they view it as prey, or they view them as an enemy, like a competition. So you get in a relationship and your person, remember we call each other supply. Why? Because you're the prey. If they're hunting, you're the supply that they're going to feed off so that they stay alive and stay with it. So they're going to then know you really well. They're going to be able to anticipate things about you. They're going to know your hot buttons better than you know your own. As a result of that, they can then predict how you're going to react when the relationship blows up. And based upon that, they're going to start to set up this, almost like I said, this PR management of brand identity of how they're going to come out on the other side. And that's why it's so hard when we get to that end and they start to smear us, because they've anticipated it so well that they've been able to, like, well, this person always does this, or they're going to blow up about that, or they're going to say that I did this. They already anticipated that and are 2 jumps ahead of you as a result of that. So it's super hard because of this. And I would even say, don't argue with the smear campaign. Don't attempt to go at it head to head. You may be tempted to do that. It may feel so wrong, so unfair that you really want to take them on, but don't, because they're good at that and they've been practicing their entire life. And you're probably not as good as they are. It's like playing chess with a chess master. They're going to outbeat you. They're going to guess your steps way ahead. They're going to know all the patterns and then anticipate it. But here's what I think that it says to you. People who really know you, I mean, really, really, really know you and love you and have support for you, then they're going to be the ones who then don't believe it. They're going to have that suspicion that this doesn't make sense or doesn't add up. And they're going to hold their judgment and wait to hear how you're doing and where you're at. You'll know who they are. And I know, because I've talked to a lot of you, that sometimes your own family ends up believing you're the participant. Your own family ends up being part of the smear campaign. And I hate to tell you that what that means is that your that your family didn't know you as well as you thought, and that your family is not really as big of a support as you wished. And that can be cause a lot of us a great deal of pain, to realize our family does not have our back the way that we hope. So I would strongly suggest that you don't try to defend yourself, but rather just take stock of who's believing what and see that as information. See that as recognizing that even the people maybe you thought should have been the closest one to you are not people you can rely on, and they're not they don't have your back as much as you thought they did. And I know that that's a huge loss. Often, a lot of us get out of these relationships and we find out that our friends and family weren't really as supportive and part of our community as we thought they were, that they really weren't, they didn't really know us and had feelings for us and were going to show up for us like we thought they did. It's so tough. It's so tough. I've encountered it in other times of my life. I've had relationships that I thought were like ride or die kind of friendships. And then I got through something really, really big that was a crisis, and they disappeared. They flaked out. So it ends up, you really find out who your friends are as a result of this. Yes, this live is being streamed to YouTube right now, so it will be saved. So you can go back and refer to it if you want to. So the public struggles to understand what we're going through. The public has myths about what it believes about victims. I don't know how many times I've heard I must have had a low self-esteem or that I didn't have good boundaries. Those do not save you from a toxic relationship. I want to right now tell you all, if you've not been in one, I want you to know that having a good self-esteem and having really super good boundaries is not going to protect you from narcissistic abuse. It takes more than that. In fact, the people that you see at the end of that relationship that look hollowed out, shook up, insecure, shaky, it's because the abuse did that to them. That's how successful narcissistic abuse is. It literally carves and hollows out and erodes a person's self-esteem. So the shell of a person that you see at the end who survived that abusive relationship is because they've gone through something really horrific with somebody who eroded their self-confidence, who took away their power and voice, who intimidated them, who wore them down, who criticized them. That's what's happened. And that's why they look the way that they look. And here's the problem with good boundaries. Narcissists ignore boundaries, but they make ultimatums. And if we in any way get tricked into becoming invested in them emotionally, we're going to then end up compromising our boundaries in order to maintain a relationship, because they'll say, you either do this or we don't have a relationship with each other. They give you ultimatums. But every boundary you set, like if you say, please don't text after 9 p.m., I'm giving the kids bath and heading to bed, they'll text at 9:01 and then tell you you're cruel and awful and rigid for not taking that text at 9:01. They'll push you just a little bit to get you to compromise, and then they'll push again and push again and push again. So it isn't about you having good boundaries, and it isn't about you having good self-esteem. Chances are you have got great self-esteem. That's why they picked you, because they knew you were confident, assured, together. You look good on their arms. That's why they wanted you in their life. But then they begin to wear you down, wear you out until you're not who you once were and you feel like you've betrayed yourself. So watch out for the public's myths on these. And another public myth is it takes two to tango. No, these relationships do not. This relationship would almost need you on automatic. It doesn't really require you to show up. It's going to go the way that it's going to go, because these people tend to have relationships that just implode. It really doesn't require a whole lot of participation on your part. You just need to be human. That's the problem. You're human, and then they end up reacting because they're looking for an idealistic partner who doesn't exist. So every relationship's going to blow up. So that's the other, I know a lot of you end up thinking, well, they look so happy in their next relationship and it's been 2 years. Doesn't that mean they're doing better? No, it just means that whatever has tipped that barrel over hasn't either happened or their partner's keeping it secret. So I don't know which it is, but chances are it's going to unravel the same way that it unraveled with you. So watch out for those myths. The public's going to really struggle with these myths. They're going to see that and assume, conclude things about you. So what do you do? Here's some suggestions if you find that your social support system is not the social support system that you wish. I would suggest that you find an online community that you feel super, super safe. I have a exclusive membership. It's $100 a month, but if you contact me, I'm willing to negotiate that fee into something that's reasonable. But it's an amazing online group, and we hang out each week for a video chat. In fact, it happens right after this live. I always meet with this group. So that's one option. And I know there's other options. I know there's even free options, but join an online community. It's so, so imperative that you have other people who can validate you, who understand what you're going through, who can give you advice that doesn't need all the backstory because they recognize the familiarity of it, so much so that they know exactly what to say. That's so, so helpful. But look for someone in your life who's unbiased and non-judgmental and patient. Somebody who doesn't need to give advice or fix things. You really don't want a fixer in your life around this issue. You want somebody who just can listen. I had two people that were just incredibly helpful to me in the middle of that toxic marriage that I was in. One heard the serial cheating And this guy was an older writing mentor, because I was writing at the time, writing a lot. And he was mentoring me. And he said, I can't imagine, Kerry, what you're going through. That must be such a heavy load. You must be exhausted trying to manage this relationship. And just having that reflected back to me, the love that someone saw me, saw the pain I was in, saw the weight that I was bearing trying to make this relationship work, how hard I was working at it. That was so supportive, and it stuck with me. I didn't do anything with it immediately, but it stayed with me, and it made a difference to the point I'm still telling you about it 7 years later. The other person that was super, super just enormously helpful to me in that relationship was a friend that I had at the time. I was living in another country. She came from another country altogether. I met her there. She's actually from Australia. Hey, anybody from happens to be here, because I know in the middle of the night for Australians at the moment, but she was an Australian living in that country I was living in. And she said, if you ever need an ear, anytime, no judgment, I've been there. I've had this kind of difficulty, and I know that it's really hard. There is absolutely no judgment. Just let me know, and I'm here. And you know what? I did utilize her that way. Several times I'd tell her, oh, someone is from Australia here. So, hey, it's the middle of the night, but it's so great to meet you today, Lil Mom. But she said to me, I won't judge you. Even if you decide to stay or take an action that maybe I wouldn't take, I'm not going to make any bias about that. I'm just here to listen. So that was so helpful to me. I did turn to her several times, and she just listened and then just supported me. I mean, really didn't give me any advice, just was just very supportive. So look for somebody like that in your life. Look for somebody, and I love this, that doesn't have skin in the game. You want somebody who does not have skin in the game, who's not invested in you liking or staying with your partner, who's not invested that you need help. I mean, sometimes, believe it or not, therapists, if we're not careful and we're not ethical, we have a need for you to stay in treatment, because that's how we get paid. I'm not saying therapists are doing that, but it's a temptation we always have to watch out for. I know that I had to manage my desire to keep my patients. I hated seeing them heal and grow, because then they didn't need me. But that was something, it was my job not to then make them dependent on me. So watch for someone who's not invested in your outcome, not invested in your decisions. That's the best way to know that you found somebody who's really going to be giving you non-judgmental, non-biased support. I found it hard to find that in the church. I wish it was different. I think the church or religious organization should be the safest place, but often they're not the safest place. So just be super careful about who you turn to and who you look to. You might even want to give them a test. This is what I would do. I would tell them something small. If I had somebody I wanted to see how good of a friend, I'd tell them a little bit kind of a, innocuous thing that to me wasn't that big of a deal. See how they react. If they react bad, then I knew, well, this person is not a person I would tell more. I would tell more, specific details that would be really, really uncomfortable. So test them out. Make sure that they really pass your need. But here's the thing, and I'm going to wrap it up and then take your questions. It is so important to have a supportive social system. That's what I'm trying to say. To have a supportive social system. I got to hear Dr. Vander Kolk speak in person at a conference. He was live, and the guy is as soft-spoken and kind as you can imagine. He wrote the book, Body Keeps the Score. And he was saying that of everybody who has trauma, a lot of people heal naturally from trauma. And when they looked at that group of why they healed without needing more intensive treatment was because they had a good support system, that they have found the best predictor of healing is a support system. So it's really, really important that we make sure that we have people around us who know how to show up for us, have some understanding. So again, if you're struggling to find that, please check out Toxic Free Relationship Club. As I said, the membership is $100 a month. That includes 4 hours of video group chat, 4 hours of it. For, would you think about it, that's $25 for a group session. So if you were going to have group coaching with me, I don't charge $25 for it. I charge way more for that. So it's really great to have an inexpensive access like that. But I know 99% of us are being financially abused. I know that. So if you contact me directly and ask for financial assistance, I'm more than happy to make a private arrangement so that you can be a member of this club. It is really, really important for me that you find support and that I'd be love to have you be a part of my community. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to take your questions. I know a lot of you have been asking questions and talking, so now I want to be able to spend some time on that. We've got a good 20 minutes. So what kind of questions? And you don't have to even it doesn't have to be about the topic. It could be about anything you want. I'm willing to take any question about what you want. Yeah, Shell, it's a common problem that even with health, so Shelly says, I have health insurance, but I still can't afford counseling. That's a common problem. I know that when I was counseling back in the day, it wouldn't be unusual for people to have to pay 50%. And that's a lot, and I knew myself, I would have a hard time affording it every week. So it makes it really hard to be able to access good care when you can't afford it. Some counselors will take a sliding fee scale. Most of them don't. I know it's really limited, but that's why I want to make sure what I'm offering is accommodating and make sure that you can, have the access that you need. So Britt's wanting to know, how long did it take me to heal? And does my job being a psychologist help with that? I think my job being a psychologist probably helps me understand what happened to me and the stages of what happened and why I'm reacting the way that I'm reacting, but it doesn't really give me an advantage in my own healing. In other words, I can't do therapy with myself. It doesn't really work that way. But here's what I did do. I did the thing that I'm telling you to do is what I did. I jumped into group coaching right away. I had found somebody in the middle of that relationship I had been following online, just like you guys are doing with me. I'd found her online. In fact, I'm going to see her on Thursday for lunch. I'm so excited. I'm flying up to a conference to a city where she lives, and then she's agreed and we're going to have lunch together. So I met her online, and she even offered some seminars. So that was back before we did all this live streaming. She held a couple free seminars that I stopped my day and watched. And when the minute I got out, I had heard that she was offering a small group coaching opportunity for women who were in my situation. Now, at the time, I didn't know I was a narcissistic abuse survivor. I thought I was a partner of a sex addict because he was a serial cheater. So I joined that group, and she held 3 hours of group coaching every week, and I participated in that for a year. Yeah, a year. 3 hours a week for a year. So I did that. And then I also, at the same time, started writing a lot. So I was writing my story in a way I was kind of like tattling, like this happened and this happened. But I found when I was writing that seeing the scenes, like writing out, he said, she said, he said, all that, like a script, it was super helpful because I began to see through the gaslighting. I could see the lies, and I started making conclusions that I never made before, never in my life made before. I discovered how many lies he'd been telling me, even the things that I thought that were good moments, I found out were probably very deceptive, and it was powerful to see through that. So I highly recommend journaling. Journaling can be, especially if you're journaling scenes, if you think you think to yourself, something happened here that's weird. I don't know what it is, but I know I don't feel right about it, and I really want to slow down and look at it. I would highly recommend that you script it. Become a playwright for a moment and script that scene. Like they walked through the door, they sat down. This is what's said. This is how they look. This is what's said next. Do that. And then when you stand back from it, ask yourself, does the flow of the dialogue make sense? What's being said that you non-verbally or indirectly? What wasn't being said? What assumptions were you making in that conversation that maybe were false assumptions or based on just you assuming this person was well attended? Those are the things that are going to super, super help you to make sense of what happened. So it really went the long way for me to write the book, Love You More, was very, very therapeutic. So I would say those are the two big things that was very, very helpful. Because if you remember, for those of you who know my story, that relationship ended right when my son was diagnosed with possibly terminal cancer. So I was like dealing with one crisis on top of another crisis. He was diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia that was very deadly, very bad. So that was my focus, was going to group coaching and writing and being by his bedside. I'm so thankful today that he's in remission. He's almost 4 years out. Next year we can claim that he's cured. So I'm praise God for that. And at the same time of that, while that was all happening, then as a minute he was starting in treatment, and then COVID happened. So I spent a lot of time alone. So I was very isolated. So these are the things that I found that really helped despite my isolation. Some of you guys are saying really great advice. You're offering advice about how to heal, and I love it. So the other things that do help is look for a counselor who has betrayal trauma, a specialty or expertise. It's so helpful. You want trauma-based therapy or betrayal trauma expertise. I agree with you, Sly. You want to have somebody who's doing a lot of somatic work. Somatic means body work, because talk therapy uses the left side of the hemisphere of the brain. It's very logical. But what happens in the middle of all this gaslighting is that the whole brain's been affected, not just your thinking part, but also your feeling part, your sense of safety, you in yourself in space and time, your memories of things, everything has been affected. So you want a type of treatment that's more holistic, more inclusive. So you want something that includes like somatic treatment, like EMDR is a good one. There's also some form of yoga that are therapeutic. I don't know what they're called, but you can look that up. And I agree. Somebody suggested to find a good therapist. Look at Psychology Today has a nice directory, and you can put in there and look for somebody who's specifically about trauma-related treatment or betrayal form of treatment. I would recommend that highly. And I also agree. You guys are coming in and talking about the importance of good habits. So I agree entirely. So look at your diet. Are you making sure you're getting enough time to get rest in? Even if you're not sleeping and you're struggling to sleep, make sure that you create an environment that's very very peaceful for yourself, very safe. Those things go a long ways. Take vitamins. I think it's very, very important that we make sure that we're really looking after ourselves in these ways. Great question. I know I took a long time answering because a lot of you guys are started talking about it, so I just stayed on the topic. Any other questions you want to talk about today? We got some time yet. Yeah, so I don't even know how to say your name. It's rare la la la. I don't know. That's really interesting. She said, we talk so much about abuse, it's hard to focus on self-care. I really like that. It is so important to look at self-care. It's terribly important. Sandra L. Brown, who was a big researcher looking at narcissistic abuse, found that the majority of people leaving a narcissistic relationship, 75%, are traumatized. So that's just a good starting point. You come out of these relationships, look at how you're going to address the trauma. So if say you survived an airplane crash, or maybe you lived in a building that's caught on fire, a tenant, and you're in a building that caught on fire and you made it out, what would you do to address the trauma? That's where you want to start first. And that's why self-care is super important. Self-care, get group support, and get into some form of coaching or counseling to help you kind of decompress and understand what's happening. This is a great question. Do narcissists ever end up with another narcissistic partner? Absolutely, they sure can. It's not very common, but it certainly can happen. So, yeah, I think I've read somewhere or heard roughly 25% of all partners of a narcissist also have a personality disorder or are on the spectrum of a personality disorder. They do attract those who are more, I would say. So in other words, if you have a grandiose narcissist, they're going to probably attract more of the covert or vulnerable narcissist. They also may attract borderline personality disorders or more dependent personality disorders. They're going to attract the complement to that. So it definitely it's not like uncommon to see that dynamic. That's possible for sure. So it's always good to be aware of that. But 2/3 of victims who get into these toxic relationships actually have no history of trauma, have no mental health condition, and do not suffer from low self-esteem. So it's a minority, a small minority. So Lucan's asking a question. I missed the first part of your question. Lucan, you said, will that relationship explode? I didn't get to see the first part of your question. If you want to rewrite that again, sorry about that. I'd be happy to take the question. Do you find that you start to trust people again? Oh, that's a great question, Emery. It takes time to trust. And I think this is one of the things that victims struggle with a lot. The trust that you're going to have in the future will never look like the trust that you once had for people. That kind of trust is gone. Most of us, when we get into these relationships, we have been blindly trusting people. We assume the world's a good place and a wonderful, people are kind and people are well intended. And so we never really vetted people a whole lot. We assumed the best of them. And then we discovered that that's not true. In fact, again, Sandra Brown said that roughly 20% of the world's predatory. And other people have come in and told me that they think the number is closer to 30, that they've heard other experts guess it's even higher than that. So the world's not a trustworthy place. So going in and blindly trusting isn't smart. We need to be more savvy than that. So can you trust again? Yeah, you're going to probably have some triggers around it. But I think to begin to trust better, maybe trust wiser, would be to consider trusting, making trust be earned, having people show that they're trustworthy, and to do it incrementally. See it like you're doing a dance. When you start to dance with someone, you follow their steps. They follow your steps, you follow their steps, and you kind of like you watch that dynamic. So when you're getting to know someone, tell them a small thing that's important but small and vulnerable. See how they deal with it. Do they take care of it well? Do they respect the limits around it? And then if they do, try something bigger, but make sure they're reciprocating. You want to have a person who comes back and trusts you with something. So make sure it's a balanced relationship, but test it out and take time. But will you trust the same way that you used to trust? You won't. Probably not. But that's not meaning that you're not trusting. It just means you've learned to deal with your trust differently than you did before. Okay, so I saw the rest of that question. The rest of the question was, will a narc to narc relationship implode? Yes, it will. Yep. How long will they be able to maintain that dynamic? I don't know. It depends on the combination of the couple. Depends on their previous history. Depends upon if they're mutually beneficial. I can think of right now a political couple that are together, and I'm sure we can if you think with me, who would both benefit from being in that relationship. I don't think they're very close. I have a feeling both of them are pretty narcissistic, but they've not imploded and they've been together forever. Even though most of us wouldn't have stayed with either one of them, they're staying with each other. So it is possible that you're going to get people for other reasons that they kind of make an arrangement. I think if, for example, the show that was about, the show that was on Netflix that went on for a long time and had Kevin Spacey, that couple, I think they were probably both narcissistic, and they were together because of where it was going to get them. Yeah, House of Cards. Thank you. They were together because of where it was going to get them. Or even think of Succession. Some of those relationships were not very good relationships, but they hadn't imploded yet. And even like at the end, I don't want to spoil it, but at the end of Succession, you get the sense of one of the more narcissistic individuals who is with another narcissistic individual may mutually stay together because it's beneficial to each one of them. So what I'm saying is this: it really depends. It really, really depends. And you have to be, there has to be something they're getting out of it. Yeah. I think the big thing to take away from that, Lucam, is this. Don't look at however your partner does in the next relationship is not a reflection on you. And it's not a reflection on your healthiness or on your lovability. That I think it really is a moot point. I know, for example, my narc had had a girlfriend that he maintained. He'd known her for 7 years before we met. Him and her were conning me together. I believe that fully now, that they were in on it together. And I believe they're probably still connected and working together at some level. So does that mean that I'm not a good person or worthy or lovable? No, it just means that he found a cahoot. He found his Batman, I guess, is one way to view it. So don't take that as personal. I know a lot of us really take that to heart and then think that means something about us. It doesn't mean anything about us, not at all. So I would ignore it, honestly. It's not good information. This person, all you know is this is not a person you'd want in your life to risk with, to be vulnerable, to try to build something with. That's all that matters, is that. There are a lot of good people, even. I'm not even talking about toxic people that I think are amazing people, but I personally don't want to be in a relationship with them. That doesn't mean anything about who they are. It just means I don't want to be in a relationship with them. So that's how I would view it. I'd view it no more than that. But that's the evidence of how much it damages us. These relationships damages us, that we end up thinking, we look at their next relationship and want to know what it says about us. No, it doesn't say anything about you at all. Why does a part of me want her back? Another part of me never want to see her again. Kristen, that's a great question. That's the cognitive dissonance that we experience. So what is cognitive dissonance? So when we're in these relationships, we don't really see the real person. We see who they want us to see. I don't think I really know who my ex is. I believe even now. I have a feeling if you and I met him as his true blues, true self, he's horrifying. I think he would scare most of us, but he doesn't really let most people see that about him. So I don't really think I know him or ever really knew him. Probably me even saying that is probably the most real thing that I could say about this guy. But the confusion he created in me, the way he showed up in me at first was so incredible. I fell in love with that person, and I kept hoping that person was real. And as a result, I stood on the fence thinking, what is it, this or is he this? Is he this or is he this? And that's what we do in these relationships, is that we end up so conflicted because they present both parts. So we love them and we loathe them. We want them, we can't stand them. We want to stay and we want out. That's cognitive dissonance, and we don't know the truth. But here's how to get through it. So the way to resolve that confusion is to say, but what does their behavior tell me? And is that the way I want someone to treat me? I don't want someone who's lying to me. I don't want somebody who can't be exclusive and keep their word. I don't want somebody who every time I do something critiques me, makes me feel like crap. I don't want that. Those are the things that you have to look at to be able to say, you know what, regardless if I love them or hate them, if I know them or don't know them, or know her or don't know her, I'm going to look at how this person makes me feel. How safe do I feel? Do I like who I am? And if those are bad answers, then the answer is I don't want to be in this relationship. And I heard something really, really powerful. Again, I'm referring back to that book, Gaslighting. Can't recommend this book enough, by Dr. Sarkis. Dr. Sarkis heard, and I just said that I heard her say this today in the chapter 4. It's in chapter 4. She said this: you don't need to have a reason not to be in a relationship with somebody. You can just not want to be in a relationship with somebody. That's enough. You don't like how you feel. You don't like how this relationship seems to you. You don't really like the lack of safety. You don't like how you show up. That's enough. You don't need a good reason. So the fact that you said the confusion is so profound, to me, it's like, I don't want to live in confusion. If somebody is making me feel like I don't know who they really are, I'm not interested. That's way too much drama for me. I value my peace a lot more than that. So those are some things to be able to maybe think through around this that might really help. Yeah, somebody said, I wish I knew this 20 years ago. I do too. I wish I knew this 20 years ago as well, for sure. Instagram, I don't mean to be ignoring you, and I'm glad that's really helpful. I do see your comments. You guys have been quieter, just more like joining. Um, yeah, yes. So you is the no, Dirk Hudson. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to me? Am I the abuser? No, I'm not an abuser. You couldn't meet a more nicer, sacrificial, committed person than me. I'm almost too nice. That's my problem. I really like to try to be there for people and come through for people. So I don't know, Dirk, who you're talking to or what you're about, but so he says he'll change. Can I trust that? This is a great question to end on. So I will take this question and then we'll wrap it up today. But remember, I'll be back next week at 4. Yeah, I'll be here next week at 4 p.m. No, I may not. I take that back. I have jury duty next week, so I don't really know what will be happening in my schedule. Yeah, next year, Kate. I hope I'll be here at 4 p.m., but I don't know. So you guys will have to we'll have to play it by ear. It depends if I get called in and have to be a part of the jury. I don't know. So it should be interesting because it's district criminal court in Texas. So it should be really, really interesting. But can he change? He says he's changing. This is true for everybody. And it's not just his, it can be hers, or it can be binary or, non-binary people as well. So how to know if somebody's changing? I have an exercise for you to try. I want you to privately identify 5 to 10 things you would like this person to be doing that would make the relationship go better. So think of that. And it has to be observable things. The name of the book, Gaslighting book's called Gaslighting. The name of the book's called Gaslighting. And it's by Dr. Sarkis, and it's a yellow book. I don't have a copy to show you, but it's a yellow book called Gaslighting. Okay, back to how to know if they changed. So pick the 5 to 10 things. They have to be observable. Like, for example, if you say, I wish we didn't fight so much. Yeah, you could kind of measure the fights, but maybe you could even talk about what happens in the fights and make them bad. Maybe I wish we had fights that ended with some resolution, or I wish we had fights where there's no name calling. So think of some way that you could actually measure if it's working or not. So you'd have to look for that. No, I'm not Canadian. I'm an American. But I grew up in Michigan, so maybe you hear a little bit of that on me because I grew right next door to Canada, right next door to Ontario. So pick 5 to 10 things. They have to be measurable, but I want you only to tell your partner 3. I don't want you to tell them all 5 to 10. Just tell them 3. You could even say this. I have some things that I'm watching that need to change in this relationship. There are several of them, but I'm only going to tell you 3. And then I'm going to see if in 6 months, if these things are better. I'm going to watch all of them, see if they're better, but I will particularly come back and talk to you about the 3. And hear me clearly on this. You never tell the entire list. Not ever. Not ever. I'm from Grand Rapids specifically too. Yeah, I lived there 25 years. So yeah, so nice to meet you, bestie. So never tell them all 5 to 10 things, just the 3. Then watch for 6 months, giving no clue to the rest of the list, no matter how much they ask you for that rest of the list. Don't, because they will give you exactly what you asked for and no more. But if you keep part of it back, then it's a mystery, and then they don't know what that is, what you're watching for. And then at the end of the 6 months, come and revisit, and are all 5 to 10 things improved? If they're not, then you need to be prepared to leave. That's the other part. Your work would be prepared to leave. Now, what will happen when you do this? I'm going to make some guesses. It isn't, oh, Ludington. Nice to meet you too. I love Ludington. It's a beautiful area. There's a couple things that are going to happen in this relationship when you do this. Some toxic people will say, hell no, I'm not doing this. I'm out. You don't tell me what all 5 to 10 things are. I'm not playing. This is a game. I'm not playing this game. I'm out of here. So be prepared. That may be the pressure for what's going to happen. Or you may have someone who then pushes you for the rest of them. Please be careful about that. In fact, you can say, make one of the 3. Make one of the 3 is, you don't push me for this content. You don't ask me what the rest of them are, because if you do, then you failed. Then I know this relationship is over because you're not taking this seriously. So make that one of, if you have a partner who's going to be very manipulative and do all sorts of pressuring and gaslighting you around that list, then make that one of the 3 things you tell them that you're watching for. And then if they start to pressure you, then you know they're not taking this seriously, and they might as well call it off. So you're going to get 2 groups. You're either going to get the group that's trying to manipulate you to get the rest of them, or you're going to get the group who's just like, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. And you know what? That tells you a lot. You'll learn a whole lot about your partner, and it also helps you get ready. So that's something that you can do. Hey, this time has been super amazing. You can tell I'm like super scattered and watching 3 feeds at the same time. I don't know how I'm able to even talk straight sometimes when I do this, but I'm so thrilled hanging out with you guys, getting to know you better. It's really, really wonderful. And I appreciate that. Oh, speaking of that, boundaries versus ultimatums, did you know I have a Substack? It's called at Breaking Free with Kerry Kerr. If you go on Substack, Breaking Free with Kerry Kerr, I have a free version that comes out every week and a paid version. So if you sign up for paid, you get both. You get both and paid and free. This week, it's on the difference between ultimatums and boundaries, and how narcissists don't set boundaries, they make ultimatums. And they'll treat your boundaries either like they're not a boundary or like it's an ultimatum. So be sure to check out Substack. I'd love to see you there. And check out my podcast, Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. I'll be back maybe next Tuesday, depending on jury duty. But it was really fun hanging out with you guys. And I'll see you as soon as I can. Bye-bye.